waitress remained calm during a robbery. The Mafia boss took notice. The evening mist curled around the streets of the city like a living thing. Lanterns glowed dimly against the fog, and shadows shifted between narrow alleyways. In the heart of this ancient city, where kings and crime lords ruled alike, there stood a small tavern called the Silver Lantern. Its wooden sign creaked in the wind, and inside, a warm golden light spilled across worn tables, inviting travelers and locals alike to share a drink and a meal. Behind the counter moved Selene, the young waitress whose calm presence seemed to command the room without words. Her movements were fluid, deliberate. Every step, every gesture, precise. She carried mugs of ale and plates of stew with a grace that made the patrons glance at her and wonder why she seemed untouched by the chaos of the city outside. Selene had learned early that calmness was a shield. The streets beyond the tavern were unforgiving. Danger lurked in every shadow, and one could never trust a smile or a hand extended in friendship. But within the walls of the Silver Lantern, she could control at least a small part of her world, even if only for a few hours each night. Tonight, however, the city outside was restless. Boo.
Rumors had spread of a gang that moved like wolves, striking quickly and vanishing before anyone could respond. Selene could feel the tension in the air, the way the patrons' laughter was just a thin layer over their fear.
Best. She moved between tables, nodding politely, listening to half-heard conversations, noticing the nervous glances toward the door.
It happened just as she poured a mug of dark ale for a traveler with a long cloak.
The tavern doors burst open, rattling the old hinges, and 3 masked figures stepped inside, their eyes cold and sharp. Knives glinted in the lamplight. "Everyone stay calm," the tallest one barked.
"Empty your purses, your jewelry, everything!"
Panic erupted among the patrons. Chairs scraped across the floor, and a few tried to hide behind tables. But Selene, she did nothing. Not a tremor ran through her body. Shh. She simply placed the mug down with a soft clink and stepped forward. Her voice was quiet but firm. "There's no need to hurt anyone," she said. Her gaze met the tallest man's mask, and there was no fear there, only observation. The patrons froze, astonished at her composure. The man's hand twitched. Before he could finish, Selene moved again, deliberately slow. She guided a panicked child behind a barrel and whispered instructions to the tavern's cook to take cover. Her calmness seemed almost unnatural, as if she was not simply a waitress but a force holding back the storm that had entered. And then she saw him. Bez, standing near the back of the room, in the shadow of the doorway, was a man who seemed almost unreal. He did not enter the tavern, did not speak, did not move, yet the robbers reacted. The tallest one glanced toward him, then back at Selene, a flicker of hesitation in his eyes. Valerian, the name belonged to Whispers, a crime lord who ruled the city with fear and shadow. He was said to have powers that went beyond the mortal realm, a presence that could twist men's hearts with guilt and fear. And here he was, leaning against the wall, watching, silent and still, like a statue of darkness. Selene did not falter. She continued guiding people to safety, speaking softly, her calm voice spreading through the panic like a river smoothing stones. Patrons who had been ready to scream found themselves standing still, listening, moving exactly as she directed.
Valerian's eyes narrowed, not with anger, but with something else.
Curiosity, interest, the kind that few had ever felt from him. What? He had watched many taverns, many faces, many scuffles, but this woman, she carried herself with a power that did not belong to this world, a light that did not bend before his shadow. The tallest robber made a sudden move toward a chest behind the counter, hoping to grab the coins. Celine's hand shot out, resting lightly on his arm. He froze. Her eyes met his through the mask, and it was as if time slowed. He stumbled backward, unsure why he had obeyed the touch of a simple waitress. The robbers, growing uneasy under her calm gaze, muttered to each other. The air in the tavern thickened with tension, charged with something neither violence nor fear alone could explain. Valerian stepped forward, the floorboards under his boots silent. A low hum seemed to vibrate from him, felt more than heard. He moved past the doorway and spoke in a voice that was both soft and commanding, echoing through the room. "Leave," he said. It was not a plea. It was a law. The robbers froze. Something in the sound of his voice made them forget the plan, forget the coins, forget even Celine's calm touch. And then, one by one, they fled, stumbling into the foggy streets outside, leaving behind their weapons, their masks, and the remnants of their courage. The tavern was silent. Only the crackle of the fire filled the room. Patrons stared at Celine and then at the man who had saved them without anyone really noticing. Valerian's eyes settled on her, dark and deep. "You are remarkable," he said. No one had ever spoken to Celine like that, as if he had seen not just her body, but the strength within her soul. Celine's heart raced, but she did not show it. "It was nothing," she replied softly. I only did what I could to keep everyone safe." Valerian's lips curved slightly, a smile that did not reach his eyes. "Nothing. Is that what you call it? You moved through danger as if it were a dance. Calm. Unyielding. Most people would have screamed or fought or frozen. Celine felt a shiver, not of fear, but of recognition. He had noticed more than her calm. He had noticed the quiet strength, the way she could hold a room together with nothing more than her presence. "Breath. You are very unusual," he said, almost to himself. Then he added,
"I must know more about you."
Celine's breath caught. She had survived danger many times, hidden from the city's predators. But this man, she felt an unfamiliar tension. Not a threat exactly, but a weight of destiny pressing down, heavy and undeniable. I don't know what you mean," she said carefully, taking a step back. Valerian's gaze followed her. "You think you are safe behind this counter.
You think the world cannot touch you.
But some forces, bet, they notice, they remember. And you, waitress, have caught my attention." The patrons shifted uncomfortably, sensing the intensity of the moment. Celine's fingers brushed the edge of the counter. Calm as she had been with the robbers, she now felt the stirrings of something else, curiosity, fear, and something dangerous in its sweetness.
"I should leave," she said quietly, more to herself than to him, but Valerian only watched, silent, like a shadow that would not be dismissed.
"Beck, you may go," he said finally, his voice almost casual. "But know this, you will not forget me, and I will not forget you."
Celine nodded, unsure what to say, and yet, in that nod, there was understanding.
Bay. She felt it in her bones, a pull toward this man who was more than mortal, a force in the dark city that no one could challenge. As the tavern returned to its quiet hum, she moved behind the counter, hands trembling slightly as adrenaline faded. Patrons whispered, their eyes wide. Some looked at her with awe. Others, fear. But Celine's eyes were fixed on the doorway where Valerian had vanished as silently as he had appeared. She did not yet understand who he was or why he had come to her. But deep in her chest, she felt the stirrings of a truth she could not yet name. Her life had changed forever, and the calm she had relied on might not be enough for the storms to come. Outside, the mist swallowed the city. Somewhere in the twisting alleys and silent towers, shadows shifted, and whispers spoke of a new player in the game of darkness. Bound, a waitress, calm. Unyielding, not just a witness to fate, but perhaps its spark. Yes. Selene poured herself a cup of water and stared into the liquid, seeing her reflection ripple in the golden glow of the lantern. Her hands did not shake, yet her heart raced with a tension she had never felt before. She did not know the shape of the danger that awaited her, nor the force that had chosen to notice her, but she understood one thing clearly. The night was far from over, and her story was only beginning. The door creaked again, a sound that made her pause, bay. Outside, unseen by her eyes, a figure lingered in the fog, watching, waiting. Valerian had left, yes, but he would return, and when he did, Celine knew that calmness alone might not be enough to save her. Her fingers tightened around the edge of the counter. She took a slow breath. Whatever came next, she would face it. And the shadows for the first time seemed to lean closer, curious about the woman who dared to remain calm in a storm. The next morning, the city seemed quieter than usual, though the fog still clung stubbornly to the streets. Selene worked at the silver lantern as if nothing had happened the night before, but her mind refused to settle. The memory of the robbery lingered like smoke in her chest, and the shadowed eyes of the man who had saved her haunted her thoughts. Valerian. She had seen his presence ripple through the room like a storm held back by invisible hands. Calmness had served her well during the robbery, but now she realized calmness could not explain the pull she felt toward him, a force that was neither fear nor curiosity alone. She did not know that he had already returned to observe her. Valerian watched from a distance, a silent guardian in the twisting alleys outside the tavern. His mind was a storm of calculations and curiosity. He had seen courage before, yes, but never such unshakable composure. And more than that, there was something in her soul, something that could touch his shadowed curse in ways that no one else could. By noon, a messenger arrived at the tavern, a sealed envelope marked with a symbol that made Celine's pulse quicken, a black crown entwined with thorns. The handwriting was elegant, precise, and yet chilling. Best. She hesitated for only a moment before breaking the seal. Meet me at the Obsidian Tower by nightfall. Your calm is needed and your courage will be tested. V.
Her heart raced, though her face remained serene. Curiosity battled caution inside her.
Bet. She had survived the city's dangers for years, but something in this summons whispered that refusal was not an option. The evening came, and with it a wind that carried the faint scent of smoke and roses. Selene wrapped a cloak around her shoulders and made her way through streets where shadows seemed to stretch unnaturally. The Obsidian Tower loomed ahead, black stone glinting like water under the moonlight. Beth. Few dared approach it, for the city's whisper said it was both palace and prison, a place where the living and the shadowed met. When Selene entered, the doors closed silently behind her. The room was vast, lit by dozens of candles that cast long, trembling shadows. And there, leaning against a balcony overlooking the city, was Valerian. He did not move when she approached. He did not smile. He simply watched, his presence filling the tower with the weight of a storm held at bay.
You came, he said finally. his voice soft but with the authority of a man accustomed to command.
"I received your message," Celine replied, careful to keep her composure. "Why have you brought me here?" Valerian's gaze swept over her, as if seeing not only her form but the patterns of her thoughts, the strength in her calm, the flicker of courage in her heart. "Beck, you are unusual," he said. "The world bends around you, yet you do not break. Bay, you are still, unshakable. And that may be the key to a curse I cannot undo alone." Celine frowned. "A curse?" He turned slightly, the candlelight catching in his dark eyes. "I am bound by shadows, a darkness that grows if I lose control, a force that has swallowed men whole. I am not human in every sense, and yet I remain tethered to this city, to its people, because I cannot leave them to ruin." The weight of his words pressed on Celine. She had seen men and women consumed by greed, by magic, by ambition. But this was something deeper. Something ancient. "And you want me to help?" she asked quietly. Valerian's lips curved in a faint, almost imperceptible smile. "I do not know if you can help, but your calm may be the anchor I need, Barain. And I am curious. I have not seen anyone like you in decades." Celine's heart beat faster. Curiosity battled fear inside her chest. There was danger here, undeniable and sharp, but there was also a pull she could not resist.
I will stay, she said.
"Bad. For now. But I will not be manipulated." Valerian's eyes darkened, not with anger, but with respect. "I would not ask you to be anything else. You will need to choose for yourself, but you must understand the stakes." He guided her to a smaller chamber within the tower, walls lined with books, artifacts, and relics that pulsed faintly with magic. The air was thick with old power, the kind that whispered in corners, that moved with its own will. Selene ran her fingers lightly over a carved stone, feeling the faint hum of energy beneath her touch. "This city," Valerian said, "is caught between mortal hands and forces older than kings. Families rule, crime rules, and magic lies hidden under the surface. By curse, it is tied to this place. Desperation.
If I falter, the darkness will spread beyond these streets."
Celine swallowed, the enormity of his words pressing on her. "And what does my calm have to do with it?" "You will see soon enough," he said. "There are trials ahead. Bath. Forces that will test your courage, your patience, your heart. You have a gift, though you do not know it yet. The ability to remain unmoved in chaos. But that is rare, and it may save more than lives." The first trial came sooner than expected. Bay. A messenger from a rival faction arrived in the tower under the guise of negotiation. Celine could feel the tension in the room as the man bowed slightly. But she also noticed something else, a faint shimmer around him, a shadow that did not belong, a trace of magic that sought to destabilize Valerian. Valerian murmured to Celine, placing a protective hand near her shoulder base. His shadow flared slightly, a black ripple that seemed almost alive, warning the intruder. Celine did not move, but she simply stood steady, observing the intruder's stance, noting every twitch, every micro-movement. Calmness radiated from her like light in a dark room.
Valerian's shadow edged forward, responding to the intruder, but Celine's presence held him back.
"Let me," she whispered. With deliberate grace, she stepped forward, her voice even and calm. There is no need for threats. Speak your intentions plainly, or leave.
The intruder froze. Something in her tone, in the way she met the stranger's gaze, seemed to pierce through the layers of deceit and malice.
For a moment, even Valerian's shadow paused, held in check by the power of her quiet presence. You are not afraid, the intruder stammered, uncertainty flickering in his eyes. Celine tilted her head slightly, serene. Fear does not serve me.
Only clarity matters. The intruder retreated, unwilling to risk provoking forces he did not understand.
As he left, Celine exhaled softly, feeling a mix of relief and awe. Valerian's eyes studied her, dark and unreadable. Expecting.
You did well, he said quietly, almost as if the words were meant for himself as much as her. Most would have faltered or fled.
But you are steady in a storm that would consume others. Celine looked down, brushing a strand of hair from her face. I only do what I must. I have survived this city because I cannot afford to panic. I have no illusions of bravery. Valerian's shadow moved closer, pressing gently against the edges of her calm. No, he said softly. It is not illusion.
You are stronger than you know. And the city, the curse.
It will need that strength. For hours, he showed her the hidden passages of the tower, the secret archives of magic and shadow, the maps that trace the city's secret veins. Celine learned not only the weight of the curse upon him, but the depth of the darkness threatening the city. She began to see how her own quiet strength could be a key to survival, not just for herself, but for him, for everyone under his shadowed protection. As the night grew deep, Valerian finally led her to a balcony overlooking the city. The fog had thickened, curling between rooftops like smoke. Below, lanterns flickered in lonely alleys. You understand now, he said, his voice low, almost tender. The city is dangerous, the forces against me are cunning, and the darkness is patient. If you stay, you will be tested. Burrow. You will see things that challenge your mind, your courage, and your heart. And yet, he hesitated, just a fraction, before continuing. I feel that you are meant to see this through. Celine stared at the mist-shrouded streets, her pulse steady. She felt the weight of destiny pressing down, but she also felt the stirrings of power, the pull of something beyond her comprehension. I will do what I can, she said softly. Bay. Valerian's gaze softened, though his shadow remained at the edges, watching, waiting. Good, he said. For the trials ahead will demand more than courage. They will demand calm in chaos and the willingness to face darkness without turning away. The wind carried a distant echo, a whisper of movement in the streets below. Celine felt it in her bones. The storm of fate had begun, and there was no turning back. Bah! She did not yet know the depths of danger, the rival factions waiting to strike, or the shadow that lingered within Valerian himself. But she understood this clearly. Her calm was not just a shield. It was a weapon. And soon it would be tested. As the candles flickered in the tower and the city slept under a blanket of fog and shadow, Celine felt the first tremors of a bond that would tie her fate to Valerian's. The calm that had saved lives in the tavern was only the beginning. And somewhere, deep in the twisting alleys and silent towers, forces of shadow whispered, curious now about the girl who could remain steady in the storm, back. And the man who had noticed her. The city slept under a blanket of fog, but within the walls of the obsidian tower neither Celine nor Valerian found rest. The night had stretched endlessly with whispered warnings, shadowed movements, and the distant echoes of unseen danger. Celine had begun to understand that this world was not the one she had known in the tavern. It was larger, darker, and alive with forces that neither magic nor steel could fully contain. Valerian moved silently through the halls, his presence heavy like a storm waiting to break. Shadows clung to him as though he had been born from darkness itself. Yet tonight they seemed restless, tugging at his form as if they sought to escape him. Celine followed at a measured pace, careful to maintain the calm that had saved her before, yet unable to ignore the tension pressing against her chest.
You feel it too, Valerian said without turning.
His voice was soft, almost a murmur, but the weight in it made Celine's heart skip. I feel something, she admitted. A shadow that doesn't belong. A presence. Like it's waiting. Valerian's shadow shifted. It is not just waiting. It is hungry. And it is patient. They reached a chamber deep within the tower, one that pulsed with faint blue light. Arcane symbols carved into the stone walls glowed softly, illuminating dust motes that floated like tiny spirits in the air. In the center of the room lay a map of the city, etched into silver and obsidian, marking the streets, secret passages, and the hidden veins of power that few knew existed. Celine traced her fingers lightly over the map, feeling the hum of energy beneath her touch.
All of this. You protect the city like a shadow in the night.
Valerian's eyes softened for a fleeting moment. I am tied to it, bound by a curse and by choice. But that curse, it grows stronger when I falter. And my enemies, they know it. Celine's pulse quickened. Enemies?
You mean the ones from last night?
Yes, he said, his voice low. And others you cannot yet imagine. They will come for me, for the city, and for you, if they learn of your presence. Her calm did not falter, but a weight settled in her chest. She had faced dangers before, but this was different. She was no longer a waitress protecting patrons. She was a key in a game of shadows and power that stretched far beyond the tavern. As if to prove his point, the room darkened suddenly, the blue light dimming as shadows curled along the walls. A ripple of cold ran through the chamber, and Celine felt the unmistakable pull of a malevolent force. It is here, Valerian said, stepping in front of her. His shadow flared outward, forming a protective barrier that shimmered and twisted like smoke. The first true test. You must remain calm. Celine nodded, her hands steady. She had survived fear before, but the pressure of standing beside a man whose shadow could consume worlds was different. Her heart pounded, yet her voice remained level. Show yourself, she said. From the corners of the room, the shadows drew together, forming shapes that were almost human, but not. Faces appeared, twisted with malice, eyes glowing faintly in the dark. They hissed, whispered, and circled, testing the edges of Valerian's protection. You see why I said your calm may be the key? Valerian murmured. The shadows test the heart. They feed on doubt and fear. Selene met their gaze unblinking. You do not control me, she said. I am steady. I will not turn. The shadows recoiled slightly, as if startled by her resolve. Bask. Valerian's eyes flicked to hers, a mixture of awe and disbelief. No one had spoken to the shadows this way in centuries, and the faintest flicker of a smile touched his lips. But the shadows were cunning. They shifted, twisting into forms that mimicked people she loved, voices she had long forgotten. Memories were conjured to draw her fear, her doubt, her hesitation. Celine's chest tightened as she recognized the faces. Her parents lost years ago. Her friends from a past she tried to forget. I cannot let you control me, she whispered, her voice trembling just enough to feel human but strong enough to resist. Ah. Valerian moved closer, a silent anchor. You are stronger than they know, he said softly. Do not falter now, breath. She drew a deep breath, grounding herself in the present. Calmness was her shield, her weapon, her clarity. The shadows hissed, swirled, and tried to break her, but she stood firm, unwavering. And then something shifted. Valerian's shadow pulsed, brightening, almost merging with hers. A connection formed, fragile yet undeniable. A tether that bound them in shared strength. Great. The shadows faltered, retreating slightly, sensing the union of calm and shadow that could rival even their darkest intentions. You are remarkable, Valerian murmured, almost to himself. I did not think it possible. But you can touch the shadows without being consumed. Psst. Celine felt a flicker of warmth in his praise, but it was quickly overshadowed by the next danger. A loud crash echoed through the tower. From the walls, hidden passages burst open, and armed men cloaked in dark energy poured in. Rival factions, aware of her presence, had come not to negotiate, but to strike. Bay. Valerian's shadow flared violently, striking at the intruders, bending them back with a force that was almost alive. Celine felt the pull of the energy, the hunger of the curse within him, threatening to spill over. "Valerian, control it!" she shouted, stepping forward. "I am trying," he growled, his voice strained. His form shimmered, the darkness at the edges of his control threatening to erupt. "You must stay calm, Celine. Calm is your weapon." Inspiration. Selene focused, breathing steadily, grounding herself in the quiet center of the storm. She reached out, not with magic, but with presence, her calm, steady, unyielding like a stone in a river of chaos. The shadows of Valerian's enemies faltered under her influence, their forms wavering as if they were nothing more than smoke in a strong wind. Together they pushed the attackers back, Valerian's shadow flaring at her side, guided by her steady presence. The battle was brief but intense, and when it ended, silence fell over the chamber. The intruders had been repelled, but the energy in the room hummed with tension, danger, and exhaustion. Valerian collapsed to one knee, shadow retreating, leaving him human again, strained but alive. Selene rushed to his side, placing a hand gently on his arm. "Are you hurt?" she asked. He looked at her, eyes dark and unreadable, but the faintest glimmer of gratitude flickered. "No," he said quietly. "It is worse than that. The curse tests me through you, and yet I am learning, slowly, that I may not be entirely lost." The darkness he carried was heavy, but here, in the quiet aftermath, she saw the man beneath the shadows, a soul wounded by time, by guilt, by choices he could not undo. And she understood, perhaps more than he knew, that her own courage was entwined with his redemption. "I am here," she said softly, "and I will not leave." Valerian's gaze held hers, a storm of shadow and emotion swirling behind his eyes. "Do you understand?" he asked. The darkness in me is not just mine. It threatens all I touch. You could be caught in it. I am steady, she said simply, and I have chosen to stand here. Even if the night is long, even if the shadows rise. For a moment the room seemed suspended in time. Two souls, one of shadow, one of calm, connected in a bond forged in danger, trust, and unspoken understanding. The city outside continued its restless night, but here, in this tower, there was a flicker of hope. Fragile, tentative, yet undeniable.
Valerian finally rose to his feet, brushing dust from his coat.
The trials are only beginning, he said, his voice low, carrying both warning and promise. The forces against us are patient, but they will strike again, and next time the stakes will be higher. Celine met his gaze, her hand still resting lightly on the table, steady. Psst. Then we will face them, together. A shadow moved in the corner of the room, faint, almost imperceptible, watching them. A whisper of laughter echoed softly, a promise that the darkness was far from defeated. Celine knew that the calm she relied upon would soon be tested beyond anything she had ever imagined. But she also knew this. Standing beside Valerian, she was no longer just a witness to fate. She had become a part of it, and in the quiet of the obsidian tower, the first sparks of trust, danger, and something far more fragile, a bond that could grow into love, began to take hold. The city had grown restless. Fog lingered like a living shadow over rooftops and alleys, hiding whispers of danger in the march of unseen enemies. In the obsidian tower, Celine and Valerian stood side by side, preparing for the trial that would decide not only the city's fate, but the shadowed curse that bound Valerian's soul. The night had deepened, heavy with tension, and the wind outside carried the faint scent of smoke and old magic. Valerian's shadow, once an uncontrollable force, had settled into quiet anticipation, coiling around him like a living cloak. Celine felt it brush against her own calm, and she drew strength from the steady rhythm of her heart. The bond between them, forged in the trials of the past nights, had grown stronger, fragile, yet unbreakable. "They are coming," Valerian said, his voice low, echoing softly against the stone walls. His eyes were dark, intense, yet there was something softer there now, a glimmer of trust, perhaps, that he rarely showed anyone. Celine nodded. "Then we are ready." Together. Outside the tower, the enemy forces moved like shadows through the city streets, blending with the fog, silent and deadly. They were armed not only with steel, but with the twisted whispers of dark magic, seeking to tear Valerian's control apart and claim the city for their own. Inside the chamber, the final preparations began. Celine placed her hands lightly on the glowing map etched into silver and obsidian. The magic hummed beneath her touch, responding to her calm, steady presence. Valerian stood beside her, shadow coiling, waiting, ready to face whatever came through the doors. The first wave struck without warning. Doors burst open, and figures cloaked in darkness surged forward, eyes glowing, hands reaching for the tower's heart. Valerian's shadow leapt to meet them, bending their attacks back with a force that rippled through the room. Celine remained at the center, calm as ever, her presence anchoring both Valerian and the room itself. The intruders were relentless, but Celine's quiet steadiness seemed to weaken their resolve. She moved among the chaos, directing the flow of energy, guiding Valerian's shadow with subtle gestures and quiet commands. She did not fight with violence. She fought with composure, clarity, and the power of unshakable calm. One of the intruders, A figure cloaked in a deeper darkness than the rest broke through the line of shadow and advanced on Celine Bay. Its voice was a hiss, a whisper meant to unsettle her. "Step aside, little anchor," it said, voice dripping with malice. "Or be consumed." Selene did not move. She stood firm, shoulders squared, gaze unwavering. "You do not control me," she said. "You will not touch what I protect." The figure lunged, and for a moment the shadow of Valerian surged dangerously, threatening to spiral out of control. But Selene's calm held fast, drawing him back, anchoring him to her presence. With a gentle sweep of her hand, the darkness wavered, faltering under the weight of clarity and courage. Valerian's shadow, guided by Selene, struck in tandem with her calm, pushing the enemy back toward the door. The figure hissed in frustration and vanished, retreating into the fog outside. Breathing steadily, Selene turned to Valerian.
"It is not over," she said.
He nodded, though exhaustion lined his face. "No," he agreed. "The curse, it grows stronger the closer we come to the heart of it. There is one final step." Psst. He led her to the inner sanctum of the tower, a chamber that pulsed with blue-white light. At its center floated a black crystal, jagged and alive with shadow. It was the source of his curse, a manifestation of all the darkness that had tormented him for decades. The crystal pulsed with energy, feeding off fear, anger, and guilt. Valerian knelt before it, shadows rippling from his form, entwining with the dark crystal. "This is where it ends," he said softly.
"But I cannot do it alone. You."
You must remain calm. Your presence will anchor me.
Breaths. "Your courage may save me." Selene knelt beside him, placing her hand lightly on the crystal's base. She could feel its pull, the temptation to flee, to surrender, to let the darkness take control. But she did not falter. Her calm flowed outward, steady and unwavering, a tide that pushed against the storm. The crystal shivered, reacting to her presence. Shadows twisted and surged, trying to break through the calm that bound them. Valerian's shadow strained, caught between the crystal's hunger and Selene's quiet strength.
You are stronger than I imagined, Valerian murmured, voice strained. "Hold fast."
"Do not falter now." Selene drew a deep breath, centering herself. "I will not leave you," she said firmly, "and I will not turn away." Psst. Not now, not ever. Together they pressed their will against the darkness, Selene's calm and Valerian's shadow intertwined, forming a protective loop around the crystal. Light and dark danced, clashing in waves that shook the chamber. For a moment it seemed as if the tower itself might collapse under the power, but neither Selene nor Valerian broke. The crystal pulsed one final time, a scream of shadow echoing in the chamber. Then, slowly, it cracked. Fissures of light began to spread, cutting through the black like dawn breaking across the city. The darkness writhed, resisted, but the bond between Selene and Valerian held. With a final pulse, the crystal shattered, scattering fragments of shadow into harmless sparks that fizzled into the air. Valerian collapsed to the ground, panting, exhausted, but free. The shadows that had clung to him for decades recoiled, vanishing into the corners of the room. Selene knelt beside him, placing a hand on his shoulder. "It is done," she said softly. Valerian's eyes, once shadowed and dark, now gleamed with something human. Something real. He looked at her, awe and gratitude flickering across his features. You have saved me, he said, voice thick with emotion. Not just from them, but from myself. Selene smiled faintly, her calm never wavering. Back to bed. We saved each other. She said, You taught me courage in the face of shadows, and I taught you that even darkness can be held back by calm. For the first time in years, Valerian allowed himself to feel relief. The curse that had bound him, haunted him, and isolated him from the world had been broken. He was no longer a man ruled by shadows, but a man free to choose. Bacana, and he chose to stand beside Selene. They rose together, the tower still glowing faintly with the remnants of magic. City outside remained fogged and mysterious, but the danger that had threatened it was vanquished. For now. Valerian extended a hand, and Selene took it without hesitation. Desperate ways, their fingers intertwined, a connection forged in trials, trust, and the quiet understanding that neither would face darkness alone again. The night is ending, Valerian said, his voice steady yet filled with a warmth that had been absent for decades. And yet, I feel that our story is only beginning. Breaths. Selene nodded, looking out over the city. Lanterns flickered through the fog, lights of life and hope shining despite the shadows. Then let us face it together, she said. As dawn broke, the first rays of sunlight kissed the rooftops, illuminating the mist like golden threads. The obsidian tower, once a place of shadows and curses, now stood as a monument to courage, calm, and the bond between two souls who had faced darkness and emerged stronger. Somewhere in the city, whispers of the event spread. A tale of a shadowed man and a calm, fearless woman began to weave itself into legend. They spoke of courage tested, of darkness overcome, and of the light that could exist even in the deepest shadow. Valerian and Selene stood on the balcony, hands clasped, watching as the city awakened. The wind carried a promise of peace, but also a quiet reminder. Shadows never truly disappear. They only wait, patient, curious, watching. And in that knowledge, Selene felt no fear. She had learned the greatest lesson of all. Calm could face darkness, courage could hold back shadows, and love, even slow and quiet, could anchor the strongest hearts. Valerian squeezed her hand, a faint smile touching his lips. But the night is over, he said. But our dawn is just beginning. Selene leaned into him slightly, resting her head against his shoulder.
Then we will greet it together, she whispered. The city below shimmered with light and mist, a world of stories yet to be written. And in the tower above the streets and shadows, two souls stood free, united and ready for whatever the future would bring. The waitress's calm had survived a robbery. But in the end, it had done far more than survive. It had changed fate, broken curses, and awakened hearts. And though the shadows would always linger, the light of courage and calm would endure, eternal and unyielding.